or at least one more if I can, before we come to the end of the programme. James Barton's question, please, next.
Are cuts to the police force endangering the public?
Cuts to the police force, are they endangering the public? The Met here in London believes it faces cuts of up to £1 billion over the next 5 years. Jenny Jones, I think you're in a position to answer this because you're on the London Assembly Police Committee, but you're also defined, I think I've got this right, as a domestic extremist by the Met.
Yes.
Is that right? So well, you're running the police who define you as a danger, presumably.
Yes, I was tagged as a domestic extremist by the Met Police for 10... I was on their database for 10 years. Now, they've told me I've been taken off, but I've actually reapplied for my file to find out if they actually have taken me off. I've been a critic for of the police for a long, long time, but even I think that these cuts are starting to endanger the public. The fact is, they were so fast, so savage, by a Tory government. Who'd have thought a Tory government would slash at the police funding like that? Nobody doubts there was fat to trim from all the police budgets, but it's gone too far. They were done so quickly, the cuts, that the police themselves had no time to be strategic about the cuts. They had to sort of slash and burn, and that's no way to run any sort of police force.
And does it endanger the public?
I think it does. I think it does. The real problem for the Met Police in particular is, of course, that they have a lot of other functions, international and domestic, but that other police forces don't have. And the government repeatedly doesn't pay them for it. Assange, for example, keeping him trapped in the embassy for all those years, £12 million. Met hasn't seen a penny of it. At least I hope that's still true. But perhaps they will tomorrow. Now I've mentioned it.
All right. You, sir, in the middle there.
Oh, yeah, it just goes sort of hand in hand with kind of, I don't know, Tories just making stuff up. I mean, the manifestos that I heard of in this election just gone and you know, the election in 2010 with the coalition said that there'll be more patrolling generally in areas, and there definitely isn't. I mean, my area generally, I mean, if I'm lucky, if I call the police for anything and they actually turn up like 3 hours later, only to like look around, walk around a bit and then smooth off again. So cuts are just a joke, aren't they?
And you, sir, in the white shirt there.
Thank you. Justine, I would just like to know, the Tories have always had a very good relationship with the police, so why are you making these cuts now?
If you look at crime across the board, actually, in London, it's fallen dramatically over the last few years. And at the same time, people who have been victims of crime are saying that they're more satisfied, actually, with how they're being dealt with the police. At the same time as that, we also need to make sure that we deliver on making sure our public finances are affordable for the public, and that includes making sure that the policing we have is on a sustainable footing in terms of how much money's going into it. So we're trying to make these different objectives match up. I think we are getting there, but we've been elected to try and get the rest of that deficit that we inherited dealt with. It doesn't do us any good to hand over a whole load of debts to the next generation. We're getting on with doing that. We've got the spending review in November, which will set out how we're going to make the next set of savings in terms of public finances. But I meet up with my borough commander regularly in Wandsworth, and actually they do work very hard to look at how they can run themselves more effectively, more efficiently. And I think it's wrong to say that the changes in funding are just suddenly being put onto the Met Police. They are challenging, they are difficult, but actually people are working to make sure how we can make sure that policing in London is able to continue to be as successful in the future as it's been in the past, but at the same time it's done in a way that has a sustainable level of funding that's going to be affordable.
Hang on, you say that it's that crime is falling, but the figures for London on knife crime show a big rise.
Knife crime is up.
18%
it's up.
increase.
If you look at crime, violent crime, including on transport, for example, you've seen year-on-year reductions. So
Justine,
the reality is crime overall has fallen. We want to see those trends continue. But at the same time, we've got to make sure that our police is funded in a sustainable way.
Knife crime is up 14%. Serious youth violence is up 8%. Youth gang offences are up 23%.
Is this because of cuts to the police?
Well, I asked this question. I sit on the Home Affairs Select Committee. We took evidence from a number of chief constables, and I asked them the specific question that the questioner just asked. Will you be able to keep the public safe in the way that you have up to now after these cuts? and they doubted their ability to do that, particularly the Chief Constable of Lancashire. And there are two specific issues that I have. We in London are facing losing more than 5,000 officers. At the moment, there are proposals to lose all of our police community support officers. We have a particular problem in my borough, next to Justine's, of serious youth violence. Neighbourhood policing is absolutely fundamental to preventing this gang culture capturing our young people.
Are you talking about the money that's provided, or about the way the police use the money? With the two different.
Both, because I asked the Met Commissioner, the Deputy Met Commissioner who we had in front of us, I said, how important is neighbourhood policing, and will you be able to carry on the prevention work around gangs with the level of cuts sustained? Will that not be more difficult? And he said that's going to be very challenging. The other big issue that we're looking at in my borough is we've had quite a lot of... we've got historic child abuse investigations. Of course, it's not historic for the people who are the victims and survivors of that, but the money that is going into that is being taken out of the general pot. There isn't even a specific sum of money for this very serious issue that has particularly come to the fore over the last 2 to 3 years. And actually, if you look at the Met, of the 30,000 referrals that are expected from Justice Goddard's inquiry into historic child abuse, half of those are going to be in London, and they're not provided with any extra resources to do investigations.
Just briefly, I'll come to you, sir, in the front. Just briefly, you wouldn't make any cuts in the pricing of...
Well, we believe you could make up to 10% cuts.
Oh, you would make cuts. All right, fine. I just want to make...
But they're cutting. The original Met budget is going to be a third less than what it was after these cuts. We do not believe that the police can sustain that.
A contributing factor to our problems with the police is mismanagement of what we can afford. It is too top-heavy. You've got chief constables, deputy chief constable, assistant chief constable, deputy assistant chief constable. No, I'm not making this up. It's a fact. It's a fact. It's a fact. You got there. After that, you got chief superintendents. Then you got superintendents. Then you got chief inspectors. Then you get inspectors before you get to sergeants. And then, look at the salary of our own commissioner in London here, £400,000 a year. And I'm not talking about the extras. And then compare that salary with that of the constable, 28,000.
All right, Peter Hitchens. Thank you very much. I get the point. I think we get the point, and we like the list.
It's a good point, but some years ago I got tired of listening to the police complaining about how they couldn't do what they were supposed to do because they didn't have enough numbers. The truth is that for some years there have been far more police officers in this country, both per head of the population and in total, than there were in the 60s, when we had much more effective policing than we do now. The reason for the problem is that the police do the wrong thing. They're very nice. They're very nice people. They're very nice people, but they do the wrong thing all the time. If you are burgled, or if you are robbed, or if you are mugged, the police cannot unburgle you, or unmug you, or unrob you. Nothing.
Are the cuts endangering the public, Peter? Is the question?
I know what the question is, but if you just have cliché politics, let politicians run on, but let anybody who has anything original to say shut up.
No, Peter,
I won't
absolutely.
I will not shut up about it because it is so important. The police are supposed, and they were invented in this country by Robert Peel, to do one thing: to patrol on foot the streets to prevent crime and disorder. That is something they no longer do. If they will start doing that again, we should pay them a king's ransom, all the money we've got. But at the moment, they won't do it. They vanish from the streets. They only turn up after things have happened. And quite frankly, that creates a demand that can never conceivably be fulfilled.
I have the solution to this problem. It's very, very simple. Like most people in London or any big city, I don't see a policeman from one month to the next, but I can't move for traffic wardens. These, they can patrol the streets, don't worry about that. And that's because imposing parking crimes is a massively profitable business. The traffic wardens are all being gradually replaced by cameras, which means greater income, lower outlay, spend the same money on policemen.
All right. I'm going to take one last question round the table in the light of something that happened this week. From Tim Paramore, please.
Is the government turning our schools into joyless exam factories?
Just very briefly, joyless exam factories. This is the news that 7-year-olds, according to the Secretary of State for Education, are now going to be tested to see how they're doing. Justine Greening, but briefly, please. Parche, Peter.
No, we're not. But what we do want to do is make sure that we have a good sense of where children have got to as they pass through schools. so that they're not all dealt with the same, and actually across the board we can start to get a better sense of how well children, individual children, are progressing through school and how well schools are doing at bringing them on and helping them to steadily be in a position to reach their own potential.
Joyless exam factories. Jenny Jones, do you agree?
Absolutely, yes. I mean, childhood should be a time when you learn to enjoy learning. It should be full of joy and excitement and pleasure and actually finding out about the world around you. So the idea of constantly testing and assessing and putting stress on 7-year-olds, why would we do that to our children?
All right, Peter Hitchens?
It is true that this is what they are, and it's because rather than doing what needs to be done to the schools, that is to say bringing back proper, rigorous education in the basics and selection in secondary schools on academic merit, they insist on constantly reaching for gimmicks and on driving the schools and punishing the schools with incessant Stalinist 5-year plans and exhortation. That's the only policy they have because they will not, for ideological reasons, do the only thing which would make the schools better.
Victoria Cohen, thank you, Peter.
Yes, absolutely, joyless exam, but not just that, joyless exam factories all day, and then hours of homework at night. They can't even come home and play. It's absolutely awful, and it's pertinent to me because I've decided, as a result of this, that our daughter will not go to school at all because it's too miserable. She'll be homeschooled. My husband, unfortunately, thinks that means she'll turn out weird. So the debate continues.
Learn to play poker at an early age.
I think that's the only way.
The woman in the very front here, and then come to you, Chuka. Yes, just briefly.
I just wanted to ask where you saw the education system in 5 years' time.
I think that might take quite a long time to answer, so maybe, if you'll excuse me, we won't do that, but Chuka, very briefly. Joyless exam factories, or are you in favour of testing at 7?
No, I think there is a problem with turning them to joyless exam factories. And look, the problems with our schools are not because our kids aren't doing enough exams and tests. We need more teachers. We've got loads of kids in overcrowded classrooms at the moment, and that should actually be the focus, I think, as opposed to continually... There's a massive teaching recruitment crisis, exactly as that lady says. We've got record numbers of teachers are leaving the profession, and I think that's what the government should be focused on, not incessantly testing our young people.
Well, I wish this debate could go on, but it can't, because we only get our hour.